Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drumm McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at changinghighered.com. And now, here's your host, Drumm McNaughton.
Thank you, David. My guest today is Eric Hogue, president of Colorado Christian University. Eric recently assumed the presidency at CCU. His higher ed background is in advancement both at CCU and William Jessup. His path to higher ed is different than most. Before coming on board to higher ed, he was in politics, a pastor and theologian, and long-tenured radio, television, and media professional. Higher ed is struggling to define free speech and censorship, i.e., what is free speech, academic freedom, who can speak, and what is the respectful way to do that. Many on the right believe there's a trend at college campuses to curb free speech and limit free expression in the name of social justice, whereas the left feels they're being more honest by bringing in context in their conversations. As you might guess, Eric joins me today to talk about free speech, its importance, and more importantly, what we need to do to encourage free speech that is respectful, productive, something we're not seeing a lot in our nation lately. Eric, welcome to the show.
Drumm, it's great to be with you today.
It's my pleasure. And before we kick off, it's going to be a great discussion on free speech on campus and academic freedom, all those kind of things. But I've got to tell you, you have one of the best radio voices I've ever heard.
Well, Drumm, compliments will get you everything in a podcast interview like this, but there is an authentic representation for the listeners. If we had a video component, they would see the other side of the positive. So radio voice, yep, but not a TV face. Definitely a radio face.
That's okay. And I wouldn't necessarily agree with you on that. You look quite the distinguished person that you expect from a university president.
You flatter me, Drumm. Thank you.
Well, before let's forget the flattery. We're going to get down to it here real quick. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Our guests are interested to find out how you came to this position, university president, as well as your position on free speech.
Ultimately, my largest segment of my bio background is in media. You refer to that at the top. So 32 years in media, nearly 23 years in talk radio. Did some sports play-by-play, born and raised in Canton, Ohio. So I did Big Ten Network, Ohio Valley Conference. Did some work in Pittsburgh, KBL Network, with a team called the Penguins that play on ice. And then covered Michael Jordan, his rookie season in Chicago with the Bulls. So my undergrad work in Ohio and in Illinois, and been married 34 years. Tammy and I have two daughters. Oldest is 32, married with two grandkids in Nebraska. Youngest is 30, married with a grandson in California. We left Ohio in 1999, went to Sacramento, California. That was the thrust of my media career. Hung out there until I left media and entered the world of Christ-centered higher education, took a job at William Jessup University in Rockland, California, worked there for 6.5 years, raising funds as the Chief Development Officer, and then arrived at Colorado Christian University in 2018. And I've been here for 6 years and was named the president just last June. So I'm some 66 days in, Drumm, the presidency here at CCU.
Well, good luck with that. That's, people ask me, what do I think about higher ed presidents? I say, it is the second most difficult job out there, the first being CEO of a hospital who are dealing with life and death. At a private Christian college, people could say, well, that's a lot easier because you're, single focused. They may be right, but you've got all of the same challenges that a regular university does. You're running a small city.
You're exactly right. And, we have 1,550 residentially. We also have nearly or the equivalent of 9,000 students, if you have the credit hours appropriately, online, internationally. So you have an online component that's about 9K. You have a residential trad res at about 1,550, 1,600. And we also have a CCU Academy, which is feeding the university with dual credit and associate degrees. So all said, 18,000 students. You have a community. You have a workforce. You have an organization and you have a business. If you can go out of business, you're in business. And so we've seen a lot of that happen over the past 3 or 4 or 5 years. And so this is a business. I'm much more of a CEO than I am a PhD. And that's why we're seeing more and more, I believe, of fundraisers, vice presidents for advancements, offices, and CDOs moving into the presidency. So I agree with you. It is a huge organization.
And coming in from a development perspective, you're going to understand the fundraising aspects very well. You're going to understand a lot of the infrastructure very well, but the academics is going to be new. So that creates a little bit of a different dynamic with faculty.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, I just left 2 meetings here in my office talking about our honors program with 2 of our distinguished faculty members. And then earlier, one of our deans for our School of Theology, which is for our CCU Online college, we call it the College of Adult and Graduate Studies. Yeah, I think so, Drumm. I think that's my learning curve. But I have experienced traditional residential undergrad experiences, both at Mount Vernon Nazarene University, Olivet Nazarene University. I also received a master's online at Liberty University, so there's your distance digital experience. And I think the mindset of many universities these days, internally and externally, when you're talking about stewardship, is looking at the operation, the organization, the company, and the divisions and factories inside of a university like a CEO. It is a business and it has to be sustainable and it has to produce profit margins. So my learning curve will probably be in the academy, but on the outside, I think I will hopefully, prayerfully navigate well in being the CEO.
Well, knowing you as I do, I suspect you will be, and you have one advantage over folks who come up through the academic ranks is you see this in terms of the end user versus the production.
Most definitely. The student is the customer. The student is purchasing the product or the products. The student wants to be mentored by faculty members that are excellent. In that line, the faculty work hard and they need to be compensated accordingly. And then your schools need to be analyzed, they need to be measured. KPIs and smart measurements are important, both for employees and the schools and factories inside of a university. You need to be relevant to the marketplace without offering a drift in your core mission, in our case being a evangelical, conservative, Christ-centered university. But you still need to be relevant, innovative, and again, you have to drive sustainability.
Mm-hmm. Just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you don't have profit.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right.
You just call them different things. So let's get to the crux of the conversation today, which is something I'm very passionate about, and I know you are as well, having written on this before, the importance of free speech on campus. When we take a look around the country, let's just forget academia for now. The culture of the country has become very polarized. You see bad behaviors out there all the time. There's a threat of violence if you don't agree with us. You get people standing up in Congress at the State of the Union yelling liar. I mean, things like that, to me, are just antithetical. I have never experienced anything like this. My background, I came from a very conservative family myself. My mom, my grandmother were teachers. My dad was a military officer and a pilot on the Panama Canal. I have never seen anything like this level of disrespect. How did we get here?
I don't know if I can pinpoint how we arrived at this point, but the point that we currently rest is definitely concerning and not good for the future of our culture. We have lost respect for each other. We have lost decorum in disagreeing with each other. I believe we've lost the ability to produce, or at least locate, statesmen and women in today's society. And it has happened as, what's the old adage? You put a frog in a kettle, turn up the heat, and pretty soon the frog is boiling. Over time, it's just grown, I would say, hotter and hotter as we go. So the origin of this, probably political, probably the external arena, which happens to be the freest expression of speech in our country. But I also think there's an educational component, which is what we're going to talk about today. How can we in higher ed, once again, describe what free speech is and how free speech behaves? And that's the key. How does free speech behave?
Yeah, I would 110%, because using 110% is ridiculous because you can't go more than 100%. But I would agree with you completely. It's all about behaviors. Where did we lose that respect for other people? You and I have divergent opinions on certain things. We've talked about those before, but I respect you as a person. I know that you are who you are. You have a role that you play. That shouldn't matter to me. What should matter is how we can communicate and see if we can find points of commonality where we agree and build from that.
You know, the free exchange of ideas works best when it's exercised with respect. So we've lost that. That's number one. We've lost respect for each other. We've also lost the ability to agree to disagree. I've heard some people say that's a ridiculous statement. I don't know how that is a ridiculous statement. I mean, it's the ability to be an individual. I don't know if it's group thought or grouping people together that we need to convince or persuade or cajole people to think the way I think so that we can actually enjoy lunch or dinner together. I don't know where that came from. Used to be that, I'll be honest here and say that I come from a very conservative ideology. And there are politicians that are on the opposite side of the aisle. But I would enjoy a conversation with Joseph Lieberman. We probably would disagree on, I don't know, pick a number, 30, 40% of the issues that we might bring up. But I would enjoy the conversation. I would enjoy the debate. I would enjoy Senator Lieberman defending why he thinks about a certain issue and the reasons that he puts into that premise and conclusion. We can't get there anymore. It is unbelievable that we can't be individuals and comfortable in our skin to say, this is how I look at truth, this is how I think according to absolute truth, and this is how I see this issue, and I'm representing my viewpoint in a conduit of free speech. And if you are different than me, then you must be evil, you must be bad, or you must be silenced. That is not how this country was built.
No, not a bit. And I take a little exception to, quote, absolute truth, because your absolute truth may be different from Joe Lieberman's or mine or anyone else, but that is our truth, and that's how we believe. And there's nothing that says that your truth is any better or any worse than my truth. It's how we believe. And how can we come together to be those statesmen like what you talked about?
Yeah. I mean, I would certainly believe that Senator Lieberman would have his position of absolute truth and I would have mine. So it would be Joe's truth and it would be Eric's truth. But once we have spent, I don't know, 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 minutes going back and forth, we would need to get in a cul-de-sac and say, hey, Joe, we're not getting anywhere. It's okay. We've benefited from the conversation. Now let's benefit from the relationship. We're going to agree to disagree on this one. What else you want to talk about? I don't hate you. I'm not against you. I'm not going to be violent. And I'm not going to commit some type of a verbal hammer or ad hominem attack against you, Senator Lieberman. I'm just going to disagree with you. And I'm comfortable with that. And I can see that you are too. So that conclusion is good. It's healthy. It's funny, you asked me about academics and faculty, and I did have 2 of our professors in here a moment ago, our Augustine Honors Program. And they have 2 faculty who teach this program here at CCU, and Jason and Steve were in my office. And they said the best part about 2 faculty, one goes with the cohort, the other comes in on certain topic matter, and they teach together in the cohort in front of the students. And he says, sparks fly when we disagree. He goes, the students actually lift their heads up. They begin to take notes. There's smiles on their faces. Our faculty members disagree on a point. And they may not agree in the end, but Steve said it's just wonderful to watch them see adults and mentors with great pedigree and great acumen, with fantastic Christ-centered behavior, disagree on a topic. I say, Drumm, more of that, please. More of that in higher ed.
Absolutely. I would fully agree. It's a great way to teach critical thinking. I mean, two people are not always going to agree. I mean, I take a look at my wife and, there's a lot of things we don't agree on, but we've been together for 23 years. So obviously we, one, agree on the majority, and two, have learned how to compromise on the rest of those things. She's a saint. She puts up with me. That's always the most important thing right there.
Here's your phrase, Drumm. She is your better two-thirds. Tammy is mine. It's just a given.
Well, she, I'm the boss in the family, and she tells me I can say that.
Well, that might hit the edit floor, so that's good.
No, I don't think so. She knows I say these things. Love her to pieces.
Yeah,
Just a great woman.
tell.
But anyway, looking at it from the faculty perspective, it's an issue. Freedom of speech is an issue. One side says, you're trying to cancel us out. The other side says, we're just teaching what we think is the right thing. I remember my time in the classroom. I loved it. I'm a natural teacher. I just am. And what I always remember doing was bringing up both sides of the argument. And it's imperative for faculty members to set that open discussion in the classroom to where you bring up both sides. Your view may or may not be the right view, and encourage a conversation. I mean, there were times that I would take a side that I didn't agree with because somebody else wanted to take a different side and say, okay, let's have a conversation about this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, that should still be the practicum within our speech departments and our speech teams. And, here at CCU, we have a moot court, and the practicum is to learn how to create an argument. And sometimes the assignment is to create an argument from a different perspective, a different point of view. That takes a little bit of work, and you learn something in crafting an argument. And ultimately what you learn is the disagreement is about the topic. It's not with the person. The disagreement is the thread of conversation, or the thread of the opinion, or the thread of the ideology. And if somebody doesn't wholly agree with you, they're not evil, or they don't need to be silenced. There's also a component of learning how to engage in conflict. I think there's I am not a psychologist, although I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last week, but I know that in today's culture and society, a lot of people are afraid of conflict because they're watching this on TV every night, where somebody has a different opinion and they're saying, I'm not going to enter that arena. There's a lot of wonderfully gifted and prepared statesmen and women who won't enter into politics because they say, I don't have any appetite for that. Nothing gets done. Nothing moves forward. And so we're losing leadership. We're losing an intellect. We're losing our culture because we cannot agree to disagree, and we don't face conflict because conflict revolves around the issue or the topic and not with each other.
I think you're spot on with that. When you take a look back at the political figures we have had in the past, the Edward Kennedys, the Joe Liebermans, the John McCains, they reached across the aisle to be able to find commonality. I mean, you take a look at campaign finance law. There was a Republican and a Democrat who came across the aisle to make that work. Yeah. Now you don't have those type of things except in a very limited sense. You don't have the friendships that are built. It's like you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, so you're the enemy. And I have to do everything I can to score points with my constituency. This is the example that we are showing our young people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not the right thing.
Yeah. I think there's two focus areas of our personhood that we might want to begin to talk about in higher ed, and it would be the mind and the heart. We need to look at disagreement from both our mind, how we think about issues, and combine it with our heart. A lot of our debates stay in the mind, or they stay in the logos, but they never enter the realm of heart or getting out of oneself and seeing it from somebody else's perspective. Even the fear of doing that, because you might become more soft in the argument, and your mind is telling you, stay hard, stay in camp, throw a stone, call somebody a name, label them, because that's an easy, lowest common denominator process, and it takes less work. Taking the high road is, okay, I have 2 ears, 1 mouth. I'm going to listen a little bit closer. I'm going to come to a conclusion. I'm going to try to add my heart into the conversation. And I bet I will still disagree in the end. We'll still disagree. But my heart will say, if Drumm and I had a disagreement, Drumm, I still like you. Let's go get a cup of coffee. Let's engage in a conversation about our families and our marriages and our kids and our grandkids. Let's get away from the heated rhetoric that we're not going to agree on and see if we can agree on the fact that we like each other. That is mind and heart combined. Let's teach that.
Oh, I agree. But you've got a lot of people who are threatened by that. I mean, you take a look, you brought up a great example of walking in somebody else's shoes. I had one of my mentors who said, you don't know somebody until you've walked a mile in their moccasins. And you take a look at Black Lives Matter, things along those lines. There is no way that someone who has been raised in privileged white America will understand what Black folks have had to go through over the years until they really sit down and they think about what's going on and have a conversation. I mean, one size does not fit all, as much as many folks would like to think.
I understand the premise and definitely the issue. But even in our example here, I might take issue with you, by Drumm, you saying, well, no way can Caucasian Eric Hogue understand the plight. You can't make that statement until you've listened to Eric Hogue on his relationship with the issue. I might have a surprise 4 or 5 or 8 or 10-year period in my life where I can say I can relate. So we make leaps, we do carte blanche blanket comments, and we come to conclusions over assumptions without not boiling down to the brass tacks of the issue. I think free speech allows individuals to express their opinions and their thoughts and their ideas without fear of censorship or fear of persecution because of these broad brush labels or broad brush strokes. And again, that creates fear, and you have trepidation from entering the discussion because something might be heard, misconstrued, soundbited, edited, stacked on, or embedded in a whole narrative, and that's not the intent of the statement you wanted to make. And so now you're taking somebody's sincerity, using it against them to defend your argument, to label them. And again, that is not heart, and that is not a remedy. And we have learned to do that because it's lazy and it's self-serving and it's nothing but denigration to our culture when it comes to free speech.
It is and thank you for calling me on it. That's very good. I appreciate that. That is an example of a respectful conversation. I jumped on the ladder of inference, which from a psychological perspective, we all know that our experiences cause us to take selected things, et cetera, et cetera. We draw conclusions, blah, 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 et cetera. So, that's a great example. It comes from listening. Until I've walked a mile in somebody else's shoes, whether they be yours or not, I don't necessarily know you. And we don't take the time to get to know people. We're too concerned about getting that soundbite, like you talk about. We're concerned about our own, quote, reputations, because these things go out via social media, they go out via the press, whatever. We've got to be able to have I'm going to use a term that's going to be controversial. We have to have safe zones where we can have these conversations and not hold things against people for what they believe.
Yeah, I would love a conversation on what a safe zone is. I'd be open to describing that. I think there's a lot of examples to that. I mean, I've had, in fundraising, Drumm, there's always issues involving the IRS. That's a different podcast for a different day. But there's always donors that are confused as to how they can get a deduction or not. And sometimes, as the VPA, well, frequently, you have to carry the bad news with the donor. And that creates not only a disagreement and a conflict, but now you've involved money, you've involved philanthropy, and that's great identity with the donor. But, safe zone, I might begin the conversation. Let's say it's something where we can't receive the gift or we have to return the gift, right? And I've been in a few of those. I'm going to offer some content here, Mr. Donor, Mrs. Donor, that is going to sound like I'm accusing you of something, and I'm not. But I'm in a situation where I have a duty to be compliant, not only to the IRS, not only to the campaign, but to the mission of my university. So please understand, this is not about you. This is about your donation only. So let's enter this conversation about the $1.2 million gift. And let's stay right there. And at the end, let's see if you want to reconsider to offer your philanthropy in a different way. If you are feeling that you cannot continue with my organization or my university, let me know if I can help you place your donation somewhere else, and I'll assist you in that. But in this case, we're going to have, your words, Drumm, safe place, we're going to have an agreed upon topic that's going to be weighted that you could easily pick up an offense. So promise me, you have a right not to be offended. Let's enter the conversation from that perspective. And every time that preamble or level set has made a tough conversation a whole lot easier. Oh, they still get messy, Drumm, because of the human condition. But you come out on the other side with respect, not hatred.
Yeah, and you have to be able to do that. I'm thinking about a conversation that just happened recently in a classroom. One faculty member apparently said something. This happened in Texas. The faculty member ended up being relieved and then put back in. Somebody reported that she had said something negative about Texas's lieutenant governor. Removed, they did an investigation, etc. I mean, this is a classroom. It's supposed to be a safe place where people can come in and express opinions. Faculty members need to be careful about these kind of things because they are considered to be in a position of authority. So they need to model these good behaviors. But at the same time, you shouldn't have to be able to go into a classroom thinking I have to censor my words because it might get reported to a political entity or whatever.
Yep. And the situation you've exampled there, I had an encounter episode with that from one of my faculty members. He's my father when I was 14 years of age. Eric, you do not behave that way. You don't talk to adults that way. You must know the setting that you're in. Have some decorum. Have some respect. This person is your faculty member. This person is your pastor. This person is your grandfather. Let's invert it. You're a faculty member. These are students. They're hoping that you stay straight and narrow. They don't want an agenda. They want an education. They want to know truth. And especially if they joined a university that identifies itself as an evangelical, conservative, Christ-centered university, they made the choice to apply, that they were accepted. They knew exactly what they were entering. And so know your atmosphere. You made the decision to enter and to comply in free association. So you're now an 18 to 23-year-old. You're going to have to grow up and realize you might have picked the wrong college or university. Change that, and you'll find a different outcome for you. Mm-hmm. These are all maturity, behavior, head issues that are never attached to the heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I love about residential undergraduate schools is it gives people the ability to grow. For most folks, it's their first time away from home for any length of time, etc. Yeah, summer camp really doesn't count. I'm sorry. I don't care who says that. But they're there to learn to integrate all of their thoughts, their hearts, their behaviors, and become productive members of society and loving people of society.
Most definitely. Yep. I think it still is, I call it the gold standard, 18 to 23, 4 years. Okay, some maybe 5. I get it. But it is, it's the whole It's the whole package, Drumm. It's the whole experience. It's learning how to live with other individuals who are different than you, and they might even have a different viewpoint in politics and faith and life ideology, and they may be in your res hall or in your cohort, and you're going to have to figure out how you live life with them for 4 to 5 years, because guess what? You're going to be spilled out into the populace after graduation with 285 million other people, and you better learn how to navigate here so you can navigate there. I think we call it the gold standard because of just that reality. I said this in the op-ed piece. I was just going to highlight it for a second, so pardon the self-aggrandizing. Free speech is a God-given constitutional right essential to the function of a democratic society. A complete college education dives deep into understanding this right. Such an education also empowers a student not to be swayed by ideologies of the moment, but to compare new ideas against centuries of accrued knowledge. It empowers students to go forth into the world as fully functioning members and perhaps leaders of a society forward thinking, forward moving.
Mhm.
That's what we're mind, heart, decorum, behavior, maturity, respect.
All of those things are critical.
Yeah.
And I would argue, using an academic term,
Yeah.
is if we always do what we've always done, we will always get what we've always got. Is that really what we want?
Yep. Yep. Well, I like what you pose it. So obviously, it is an end game. I certainly hope, Drumm, that higher ed can grab hold of this issue and example it maturely.
Yes.
I pray that our culture can come together on the fact that it is okay, it's good, it's healthy to agree to disagree and to share a spectrum of ideas on an ever-growing menu list of agendas. I mean, the agendas now and the groupthink now is populous. So the only way we're going to navigate this versus being siloed or pocketed in our groups and throwing stones at each other is come to the ability of understanding that disagreement is a good thing. It shouldn't be feared, but it has decorum and respect and appropriate behavior attached to it. And the end game is not for me to make Drumm me. It's for me to disagree with Drumm on an issue, but then love the fact that I like Drumm and he likes good coffee. That's America.
Especially the coffee part.
Yes, most definitely.
Well, Eric, this has been a fabulous conversation. Two quick things, okay?
Sure.
One, what do we need to do? And this kind of leads into the last couple of questions we always go with, the 3 takeaways for presidents and boards. The first one is, what do we need to do? How do we need to model this as senior academics so that we can teach our young folks these kind of behaviors that they're certainly not seeing in Congress, they're not seeing in society in general?
So from the academy perspective, I might say 2 things, and I like talking points, hence the talk radio past, right? Resilience. You are not a victim in every situation that you believe you have received the short stick or draw. We need to build resilience, not only in our students, but in ourselves. Not everything is victimhood. Not everything is a crime. You can't escalate every situation where somebody disagrees with you as an impingement upon your right or your freedoms. It's in the wide minority. So let's get some resilience in ourselves. Let's build that, not only in our students, but in the administration, in the faculty. I might even say it this way, and it's rather flippant, so I apologize. Let's grow up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a worthy effort for this value to be a part of our faculty. Let's grow up. Let's be the adults in the room. Please? Please? And number 2, truth. There should be a constant pursuit of truth because I am thankful that early on, as a young child, my parents taught me the truth of gravity. You probably shouldn't jump off the monkey bars because of gravity. That's truth. And that's been healthy and it's good. Bobby, who lived across the street, didn't agree with that truth. And he ended up with a broken collarbone because Bobby jumped and I did not. But the ever-present hunger for truth, even though it might be categorized as my truth or your truth, that we can talk about what we are learning according to truth, even to beauty, and I might say God's creation. But that truth pursuit and desiring to know the absolute truth, that's not wrong. And it's not wrong for me to be on the journey in a different cadence of the 5K run toward truth. But again, it's going to take people growing up to realize he's allowed to think what he wants to think. We disagree on that issue. That's okay. In this country, you can do what you want. I can do what I want. And we'll journey on. And once again, apply behavior and decorum to it. So those two things. But man, I would put a bumper sticker together today. Let's just all grow up a little bit. Can we grow up? It's kind of embarrassing some days.
I hear you. And for me, I'll add one thing to that. And this is part of a maturity thing, is learning how to listen.
Yeah.
If you already walk into a conversation, somebody says something, and it's a proven fact, a third of the way through the conversation or a statement, the person who is listening is already developing their argument to go against. If you listen to other people, you might learn something, not only about them, but about what they're saying.
Now, Drumm, I blame the media for that. I miss the long form moderated talk shows.
Absolutely.
I hate 5-minute segments. I hate it because what you do as a guest is you talk over the questions. Yeah.
That's it. Well, you have your talking points. You have to stick to your talking points. Doesn't matter what the question is.
Yep.
3 takeaways for your fellow presidents and boards.
Resilience. Make sure that we're producing resilient students, that they can be resilient in the marketplace. Number 2, that we would example decorum. Can we all please do that? Let's example it, behavior. Let's act like the adults in the room. That's vital, even when you disagree. And number 3, this is a worthy cause. Free speech is valuable. So is free association. We are not all going to agree on all things. That's absolute truth. So let's start there and work back. If Drumm and I can be pragmatic enough to agree on 80% of the things we talk about, that's a really good relationship and probably lifelong, and I would enjoy that.
Absolutely. Thank you. I would echo that as far as what you said and the enjoying the relationship. What's next for you, Eric?
More coffee, Drumm. More coffee.
Well, I've already made one good recommendation for you. I don't know if you've ordered it yet or not. They're not a sponsor of the podcast, so we're not going to mention it online. But it's really good coffee from Kona.
Well, it is any Kona coffees. Well, I'll just be honest. Any coffee's good coffee, Drumm, these days.
Oh, I've got to disagree with you on that one, Eric. That may be your absolute truth, but it certainly isn't mine.
That's all right. We can go with that.
Very good. Eric, it's been a pleasure. This is a very different format than what I typically do, and I've thoroughly enjoyed having this conversation with you. I look forward to more.
Drumm, thank you very much. I feel the same way. Thank you for the time, brother.
My pleasure, my brother. Take care. Thanks for listening today, and a special thank you to our guest, Eric Hogue of Colorado Christian University. It was a pleasure having you on the show, Eric, and I look forward to the next time our paths cross. Tune in next week when we welcome Dr. William Britt Kerwin to the podcast. Dr. Kerwin is one of the longest-serving and most revered university presidents we have in America, with tenures at University of Maryland College Park, the Ohio State University for 4 years, and System Chancellor for the University System of Maryland for 13 years. Britt joins us today to talk about presidential turnover, something he's well qualified to talk about, what's going on, and what we need to fix this. Thanks again for listening. Until next week.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drumm McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.